I'm not saying that if your child can't do this, don't send them to college. What I am saying is that if your child can't do this, you have to acknowledge that they need some support. That support might be taking more time to go to college. That support might be a crash course in getting yourself up and saying, we're not sending you to college until you can demonstrate that you can get up on Wednesday at 9 o'clock on your own.
Welcome to Take a Beat, a podcast dedicated to those who are wanting to hit pause on the hustle, get clear on your direction, and head toward the life that you envision. Today's episode focuses on the benefits of taking a beat when you're trying to figure out what comes next after high school. A time when young people can feel a lot of pressure to make big decisions, yet at the same time might get swept up in the conveyor belts of what everyone else seems to be doing. To help explore this topic further, I talked with Prasant Nukalapati, who mentors and coaches young people to help think through their path after high school. In this episode, he shares some strategies to help determine whether four-year college is the next right step, and some signs that it might not be. He also talks about some alternative paths and why they don't have to be viewed as second-rate options. And he talks about the benefits of encouraging young people to start reflecting on their purpose. Take a listen to hear more. Thanks so much for joining today, Prashant, and for coming on to talk about how you help young people decide what comes next for them when they're in that transitional stage, graduating from high school. To start off, can you share a little bit of your background and how you got started with this particular type of work?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. So I have worked with young people and their families for over 27 years. I was first a classroom educator in middle school and high school. So I had the chance to see what it meant for young people to learn in different ways, and also to see that young people do learn in different ways, in the sense that like no two young people are alike. What they need to feel successful, what they need to like access information is different. And I've had also a lot of experience in terms of working with young people around transitions, whether that be in the admissions process or mentoring young people in terms of leadership. So this work of specifically trying to help young people in this transition age, I think came as a result of a couple of things. One, my oldest, who's now 22, was, I think, in the midst of a journey of trying to figure out what came next for him after high school. So he had gotten into a number of colleges, but I think all did not necessarily feel like that was the right step for him to take right now. So part of it is just my experience as a parent, right? And part of it is the experience of just interacting with young people in different spaces and in different ways, and seeing the level of burnout that young people were experiencing, particularly around 16, 17, which is, the latter years of high school. And just feeling like young people were communicating that they didn't quite know why they were doing what they were doing, but they knew they were supposed to be doing it. And that can be a little bit heartbreaking, right? It's heartbreaking as a parent. It's heartbreaking as someone who's committed to young people. But it just seemed like there was a need to work with them and also their families and parents, who often feel a pressure around following the path of everybody around them, right? So in the same way that young people feel pressure when they look around, and in this country, we've become a very college-going culture over time. So young people look around and they feel like, oh, I'm supposed to go to college, right? But if you ask them why, they're not entirely sure. And then their parents feel that pressure. They look around and they're seeing all these parents who are like feeling like, oh, well, college is the answer, right? College is the destination. It just didn't feel like this was the only path to success. For me, like what excites me about working with young people is helping them find what matters to them, and then helping them find a pathway to that goal. And so that's really the backbone of the work.
I think it's interesting that you noticed a trend of young people not necessarily knowing why they were taking the next steps that they were taking and kind of going through the motions, maybe. In your experience, do you notice any signs or themes among young people who might be questioning whether four-year college is the next right step for them?
It's kind of complicated, because I think what happens is that like some people they already have that feeling that maybe they're not on the right track, right? They already have some inclination that like this is feeling overwhelming or like, what am I doing? But often those conversations come up as I'm talking to young people around helping them through the college application process, which is one of the things that I do. And it's in moments like that, and you often see it when young people have to write essays for colleges, because essentially the colleges are asking them to reflect on their life, asking them to reflect, maybe why they want to come to that school, why they've chosen the path. And it's a moment where it feels like young people have not had that opportunity. And so I think a lot of the work that I do is it's often like the first time that a young person pulls over and it's just like, wait a minute, what, like what, how did I get here? Right. I never want a young person to feel like, how did I get here? I never want an adult to feel that way. And often as adults, we feel that way. Right. So if there's a way to catch young people and help them like develop that sense of reflection, that sense of pause, question, course correct, make changes. I think that's a lot of that work. So it just really happens at different times. It just for each young person, it happens at different times, but often it's happening like in that period of like the transition to junior year, which is also when people start thinking about the college process.
And are there things that you do in working with that person to start to help them then further reflect on what is the
Mm-hmm.
path forward that I might want to take?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I try to do is first work in a framework of helping a young person clarify their purpose, right? So that really, there's that gentleman, Simon Sinek in the business world who talks about like your why, knowing your why. I think that's really the first step. A lot of times I work with a student or their parents, and they're just kind of like, I have a deadline, I have a deadline, I have a deadline. And really, it's about like stopping that train or like pausing and saying, where is this going? Right? Like, what is your thought? Like, what is your intention about where this is going? And so having a framework around personal purpose. And I think it's a mixture of some different things. A lot of times young people might think like, oh, you're saying like, what do I love to do? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what do I really like to do? And that's part of it, but I don't think a personal purpose is entirely about like what you're excited about. I think that's one component. I think another component of personal purpose is clarifying and understanding what you're good at, right? So it's this combination of what you love, what you're good at, and some other factors. And one of the factors that we explore often is this idea of like, how do you want to contribute to the world, right? How do you want to matter to others? And so like that, I think for like, blows a lot of young students' minds because they're just like, what? Like, what does that mean? But it is so essential because I think that question gives them clarity in a way about their relevance. Like, aren't we all at any point in our lives looking at kind of like, well, why am I here? Like, what do I add? Like, what is like, how do I positively impact people's lives? I feel like that's something that's really important to
Yeah.
students, right? And so looking at this framework, there's a couple of other pieces, but that's where we start. We spend like 2 sessions just on that. I often start the process, like one of the first questions I ask is I ask a student, I give them a minute and I say, so imagine we're in a job interview. And in a lot of job interviews now, people will start by saying, tell me a little bit about yourself,
Mhm.
right? Which seems like such an easy question. But if you really think about it, people often go through a list of things that they do, but not the things that matter to them.
Okay.
Right. So a typical student might be like, oh, well, I'm 16 and I live in Oakland and I do this and I play sports. And it's like I want them to practice saying, I do this because it's in service of the way that I look at the world. So all of these are just like ways to like break down this nebulous idea of what it means to engage with your personal purpose and use that as a starting point, Because once you, and it's not to say your personal purpose doesn't change, but it's like, this is where you are right now. And how do you feel about that? Right. Like, I'm really saying, let's take stock. This looks like what your personal purpose is based on the things that you told me. Is that what you want? And if it is, how do we grow that? How do we put opportunities in front of you that make sense? And if this is your personal purpose and you're like, whoa, like what happened? How did I get here? Isn't this the time to try to think about a different path? Isn't this the time to explore some different possibilities and get on track with how you want to live your why?
Yeah, it's got to be tough. I mean, I remember the pressure at that age of feeling like I had to make these big decisions. How do you help young people to stay open and optimistic about the process as opposed to maybe feeling more anxious or stressed about it?
One of the questions that comes up around personal purpose in that same framework I was talking about is, what are you curious about? And part of is meant to be, there's all this out there. Like what are you curious about? What are the things you want to explore more? But I think I'm trying to say to them, like, that is your responsibility. Like, as a human being, like, it's your responsibility. It's not my responsibility to be
Yeah.
curious for you. It's not your parents' responsibility to be curious. It's like our own responsibility to be curious. And I think when I have those conversations with young people, I also try to reflect back on my own journey, which has been one of lifelong learning.
Mhm.
Right. So I'm in education because I believe in lifelong learning. And I share like all of the things that I've tried in my life, from like that first time I ran for student body representative and didn't win, and then I ran for student body president and didn't win, and then I tried like learning German and I wasn't successful at that. But like, part of it is that it's trying, because like for every one of those things that didn't reach a conclusion of kind of like, oh, now I'm fluent in German, or oh, I became student body president, it's what it does is, it just, for every one of those things that didn't sort of like pan out the way we might have, there are so many other things that I have tried in my life and have brought me joy and have put me on different pathways than I would have tried. I, for example, did at one point wanted to be a baker, and so I took a baking program class, and I was the worst student in that class, like hands down the worst student in that class. But I was just kind of like, what does it feel like to be the worst student in this class? Like, I was like, and I thought, like, it's not that bad, honestly. Like, what's the big deal? And like, I burned the cream and it turned into an omelet, like 3 out of the 4 times. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, in that situation, it was pretty low stakes. So that's part of guiding young people through like trying things, is like introducing what is a low stakes, what is like medium stakes, what is high stakes. And I think what we do is we sort of push young people towards college, which is very high stakes.
Yeah.
It's high stakes because there are expectations. It's high stakes because there's so much money involved. I mean, they cost so much. But like, what are like low stakes ways to like encourage curiosity if that is not something that the young person has naturally? Those are the things that we talk about.
I guess if someone is potentially on the fence of whether a 4-year college is the best next step, what are
Yeah.
some alternative paths for people?
There are so many. And I think what I want people to understand is that college, 4-year college, may or may not be the right fit right after high school.
Mhm.
But putting it on pause doesn't mean that you never go to college. I just think that there are young people who, for example, need to be doing things with their hands and involved in the trades, which in some ways are much more AI proof jobs than some of these other jobs that, they're going off to college and, struggling to find, and then these jobs are disappearing, right? I think that young people need like the 2-year college experience as a transition to 4-year college, because like here in San Francisco, for example, the community college is free. What a like wonderful way to explore, right? And what a wonderful way to take care of introductory level classes and have them be free. Like, do you need to take introductory Spanish at Harvard? Or can you take introductory Spanish at your community college for free? Right. and get a taste of that. And maybe there are some skills that you need to learn along the way. Like maybe you need to learn how to get on a bus by yourself and go to school. Maybe it's the opportunity, so it's we're talking about like these different pathways. Sometimes the right pathway to somebody might be through military service, right? There are all these different ways to think about it. And not only the destinations, like a specific destination, like a gap year program or a trade program or an internship program, but that it can be a time to learn some of the skills that will support your independence. We think of college as the destination. I think of college as a stop on the pathway to independence. So why not help young people figure out how do you save money, right? Instead of like trying to figure out like all of these things while they're taking classes, while they are like managing their own time for the first time, while they have all these responsibilities, why not simplify? Maybe a young person needs to live at home and have a job that they get to down the street. But it gives them time to like be in conversation with their parents around like, what does it mean to save money? What does it mean to get an apartment? Like, what are all of these things that we can work on? So part of it is like there are different paths, but part of it is also underlying all of this is that this is a time that young people can develop skills.
Yeah.
And so like in a way, I want people to think about that, not only like different pathways, but an opportunity to develop skills.
Which is, really cool. Do you ever then bump up against some resistance of, well, what if I fall behind, or my
Mm.
peers, or whatever the expectation is?
Absolutely, absolutely. Nobody wants to talk about this, but the biggest driver of student choices at this time in their life are their peers.
Mhm.
And so you see this even when it comes time to decide what colleges, if someone is applying to four-year college, what colleges they are interested in applying to. And they will say, they'll give you a list of colleges. And then you'll say, okay, well, why those colleges, right? Because they haven't really thought through like how going to that college connects to the purpose. And they'll say, almost inevitably, they will say, that's where my friend wants to go. Or like, my friend said this was a good school, or this student in my class said it was a good place. So I think that for them, there's a lot of sense of like I don't really know what's going on, but if I just tag along on someone else's journey, like maybe it'll be okay. And so that's why there's a real sense of importance placed on like this school or like this pathway. So it can be hard. It can be hard because they don't want to miss out on that. And as somebody who had maybe a non-traditional path through college where I went to a good college, but after my first year, it was a real struggle. I had to take a year off. And then I came back and I was on a different schedule. I'm like, I don't want to pretend that that might not happen, but it doesn't, what's the best way to put it? It's like, just because you don't want to be on a different schedule doesn't mean that you might not need to be on a different schedule. Does that make sense? That yes, you might have that feeling, but it doesn't change your reality.
Right, right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think parents also, that's the piece that we often leave out is that the parents also feel that way, right? They also feel like they don't want their kid to miss out. They don't want their kid to be left behind, like they want to wear the same college sweatshirts that their friends, get to wear. So there is definitely a lot of FOMO, but it's also a little bit like, okay, but if your child is not ready for the four-year college experience and then boomerangs back to your basement and is there, they're still on a different path. I mean, there are more young people doing that. So maybe it's not that different a path, but do you see what I mean? There's that fear, but like, if your kid needs to be on a different path, whether they're on a different path at 18 or 22 or 30, like nothing will change.
Right. So might as well sort of nip it in the bud in the beginning and maybe.
Yeah. Well, what I want to encourage families to do is think about this proactively. A lot of times they're thinking about it reactively. They're just like, no, 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 my kid's ready for school. And yet at the same time, they're telling me all these things on the side that make me think this is not the right path, right? So they're just like, well, we're going to give this a try. And I'm just like, this is a very expensive try, but like, we're going to give this a try. And then they come back. And then it's just like, oh, now I have a young person who I was pretty sure should not have gone to college, but we sent them to college because everybody was going to college. And now they're depressed. Now they're dealing with anxiety. Now they're dealing with a sense of failure. So I want people to not think of these alternative paths as just kind of the booby prize, like the thing you do if you can't hack for your
Right,
college,
right.
right? I want young people to think like, I really want to do trade school, or like, I really want an internship, or like, what would it be like to travel? Not like, oh God, I guess I'm not going to college. What else can I do with my
Right.
time? Those are two very different mindsets.
What might be some of the signs or indications that someone might not be at this particular moment in time, not ready, but just that's not maybe the best fit of a 4-year college?
That's a great question. It's like such an important question for families to consider. I will say that like the number one thing is, well, I think I'll share two of the pieces. One is, can your child independently do the things and organize their life um, in a way that ensures that things get done? And what I mean by that is, you know, sometimes I work with a young person or a student, and they might not show up for a meeting, or they might like miss a meeting, or something like that might happen. And then I'll reach out to the parent, and I'll just say, I'm just letting you know that this happened. Then they're like, oh, he always has a hard time getting up, at like 9 o'clock or something like that. And I'm just like, what do you think is going to happen at college? Are you going to college with them? Are you going to wake them up at 9 o'clock? And they'll say something like that, like, oh, like they've always had a hard time with that. And I'm just kind of like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Because, when you think about 4-year college, what's complicated, what's so wonderful about it, right, is like you don't have classes every day.
Mhm.
But the nice thing about high school is that you do have classes every day, and you just show up. You just show up, and you know that like this period starts after this period starts after this period. In college, it's, oh, you have a class at like 11 o'clock on a Wednesday. Okay. Oh well, I slept. Like it's, so if your child, as a parent, if your child is not demonstrating that they can do these independent tasks, like get themselves to places on time, I think that's like the number one thing,
Yeah.
right? Whether that's practice, whether that's school, whether that's an appointment, whether that's whatever commitment it is, that is a sign that they need some support. I'm not saying that like if your child can't do this, don't send them to college. What I am saying is that if your child can't do this, you have to acknowledge that they need some support. That support might be taking more time to go to college. That support might be a crash course in getting yourself up and saying, we're not sending you to college until you can demonstrate that you can get up on Wednesday at 9 o'clock on your own. So that's one thing. The second thing, and I think this is probably like the most important thing, can your child recognize when they need help, and can they ask for that help? I think this is like the number one thing, because if you're one of those parents where you're just kind of like, do your homework, do your homework, do your homework. Oh, look, it looks like you're struggling with your homework. Let me call your teacher and see if maybe they can meet with you, right? Ideally, the student is doing it on their own, right? But like in high school, you can show up at high school as a parent and just be like, hey, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, or you have parent-teacher conferences, right? Like those old relics, parent-teacher conferences. There are no parent-teacher conferences in college,
Right.
right? And no college professor wants a parent showing up asking, because there are expectations at that age. So it's not to say that like sometimes a parent can't step in, but it's much easier to do at a community college where there's sort of an understanding that like people are on different paths, people might need different support. I've even taken a class with my son at a junior college for that reason, right? But I would never be able to do that at a 4-year college. So fundamentally, can your child recognize when they need help, and can they self advocate? And where are they on that spectrum? All of these things are on a spectrum. Are they at a point where they need massive amount of help, or are they at a point where they just need like a little bit of nudging, and you just need to set up a little bit of a system for them to kind of do that? Because One of the things that parents don't understand about four-year college is that you can pay your child's tuition, but because of legislation that exists, you may never see their grades. Colleges are not obligated to give tuition paying parents their students' grades. So what do you do with that?
Yeah.
Right? So these are the types of questions that I think parents really need to, you have to sort of step back from like, oh, if my child doesn't go to college, he's going to be left behind. Like as a parent, I would be asking, I am paying $20,000 a year, $40,000 a year, $60,000, $80,000 a year. Is this really a good investment of our time right now? Do we need to develop some of these skills, even if it's over the summer between high school and college? But think about like, I don't know if you went to a four-year college. I went to a four-year college, right? That summer after our senior year, it's just like
freedom.
Oh, I've earned this, I've earned this, I've earned this vacation. I don't need to do anything. That doesn't work for everybody. So these are just two examples to ask your child, like, where are they on that spectrum? Can they do things for themselves? And can they self-advocate?
I think it's such a good point that when we're, any of us, so focused on the end goal that we're not always paying attention to the reality of what that goal is going to entail or even require once we get there. So it can be helpful maybe to think about those things or reflect on them before college, which is, like you said, a really expensive end goal.
Yeah, it really should be seen as like an exercise in guided reflection. So that's what someone in my role does. They can identify the questions that aren't maybe first on a parent's mind. I put in front of them, another thing that a young person should be able to do is take care of themselves. Like they should be able to do laundry. And parent might be like, well, what's the big deal? Like, laundry, like how does that affect their college? But like they don't understand the domino effect of like what not being able to do your laundry means. And you like maybe are less likely to show up to class on time because you feel like a little grungy or whatever it is. And so there are these things that I think sometimes parents don't think about. And I think they feel like they are paying so much money to a college that there must be somebody on campus who's going to do the things that they do for their child. And there is not. There is no Mr. and Mrs. College taking care of your child. There are schools that have a little bit more support around that, but most colleges, they have this expectation that your child be able to do these things on their own. And it's really, I think, important for them to understand that there is nobody who will do their role.
Well, definitely all important things to think about. I know you have to run, so I want to be respectful of your time, but is there anything else that you would want to mention that I haven't gotten to? And then also, where can people find you if they want to learn more about working with you?
Yeah, I think I want people to leave, leave listening to this conversation feeling like there is possibility, there is hope that, there are people out there to support them in their journey, that this doesn't need to feel like a lonely journey as a parent, right? If your child is on a different track, you don't need to feel like you are some strange outlier and no one understands, right? If your child feels like they're not ready for four-year college, they don't have to feel some way about that there are resources and people like myself who are here to help with that journey. And I think I would also want people to understand that these questions around purpose and why are questions that as adults, we are still like, I don't know about you, but like we are still asking these questions, like what is my purpose? What is my why? Right. So the more practice we can give young people at an age where they can impact their path and where they don't have the responsibilities of adulthood, it is such a gift. Because the older we get, one of the reasons we don't think about our purpose and our why is we have a mortgage, we have relationships, we have responsibilities. Like when they are this young, like this is a perfect time to have them do that, because the more responsibilities we have, the fewer pathways we have to think about reflection, to think, to take a beat, to pause, to sort of, because we feel like there are these things that like, now it's just like so agitated because there's always something that demands our attention. So those are the things that I would say. Let's help young people like have this practice as early as possible so that the path that they take puts them in a place where they feel this is exactly where I want to be and not how did I get here,
All right.
right? So, and as far as finding me, you can find me online at whatcomesnextedconsulting.com. I think you're going to be putting the link somewhere in the podcast information as well. And I have like free consultation for families to just understand a little bit more about how I work with young people and to try to help them figure out what part of their journey they can get support with. So there is no need to feel alone in this. Every day is a day full of possibilities, and every day is an opportunity for young people to start that path of living a meaningful, authentic life to them.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. I think it's really important. I wish I had been more reflective at that age and probably, would have helped in a lot of ways.
No, thank you. And I really appreciate this podcast for its focus on pausing, right? Sometimes pausing is hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes pausing is intimidating, but I think it is so essential to having the life that you want.
Well, thank you again. And I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
To learn more about Prasant and how he's helping young people prepare for what comes next, be sure to check out his website, which is linked in the episode description. Thanks for listening, and take care.